In this video, we're going to look into Justin Baldoni and his fake feminist brand, Wayfarer.
I've been pretending to be a man that I'm not my entire life.
And we're going to compare it to Playboy, which historically promoted the idea of giving women freedom, while behind the scenes it was very much exploiting them.
You might recognize me as male escort number one. Photographer, date rapist, shirtless date rapist from the award-winning Spring Break Shark Attack, shirtless medical student, a shirtless steroid-using con man, and in my most well-known role as Raphael, a brooding, reformed playboy who falls for, of all things, a virgin, and who's only occasionally shirtless.
Up until last year, not a lot of people knew who Justin Baldoni was, especially outside of the US. He was an actor, influencer, and filmmaker who'd racked up a lot of views on a TED Talk when he said he wanted to redefine masculinity and that he was fed up he could only play roles where he had to show off his body and play a misogynist, because that's not who he really is. But he doesn't say anything about sex objectification. He's cultivated an image of the new perfect man, portraying himself as so vulnerable and caring of other people. He's an advocate for social justice, and because he has a man bun and he's not afraid to talk of his vulnerability, that makes him in tune with feminism, directing his message to younger men. He's done a TED Talk, he's written books, he's got a podcast called Man Enough, and this was all going along quite nicely for him until things came to a head in summer 2024 when he decided to put out a movie for his production company, Wayfarer Productions, called It Ends With Us, and it's a story about domestic violence, and offered the leading role to Blake Lively. And that's when the trouble started. During the filming, she and others began to complain about experiencing sexual harassment from him and partners in his company on the set, and Wayfarer did not have a proper employment infrastructure set up to deal with it. Things escalated, and by August, Steve Sarowitz, the main investor in Wayfarer, was quoted as saying he would pay $100 million to ruin the lives of Blake Lively and her family, and they hired a crisis PR team to cover up Justin's true identity, because if he was a genuine feminist, he would not have allowed or been part of this kind of behaviour in the workplace. His Baha'i religion that we're going to get onto promotes female equality, and so an alleged smear campaign was launched, accusing her of, amongst other things, bullying him and using the film launch to promote her own products. So behind the pink suits and low-cut vests, things were not as feminist as they once seemed. Now we've got multiple lawsuits that have been filed, and an outpouring of hatred and negative stories about Blake Lively and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, which has completely overshadowed the original issue of sexual harassment in the workplace. But this time it's been brought to the public's attention by an actress with some wealth and power in Hollywood, Blake Lively, and she collaborated with a journalist from the New York Times, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, an article which exposed it all in December 24. And I've been following this story pretty closely since the start. My interest was in how the media or social media campaign was being orchestrated. I had noticed, like a lot of people, how much content was heading my way, trying to persuade me to dislike Blake Lively when I had literally no interest in her. And when I heard about her official complaint in the article, I looked a lot deeper into Justin Baldoni. And because I've been looking at the history of what happened with Playboy, I began to notice parallels. They might look worlds apart, but both of their brands focused on how to be a better man, their image as a man, and their relationship to women. Standing up for social justice was what they both used to promote themselves, because men are having a hard time. Hugh Hefner promoted himself as an intellectual entrepreneur, a man of sophistication.
Hello there. Glad you could join us this evening. I'm Hugh Hefner.
During the 1960s, he also positioned himself as someone who cared about women's liberation and the rights of black people. He would often use them as talking points. He was best friends with Bill Cosby, a female journalist posing as a Playboy bunny, exposed what really went on in his Playboy clubs.
He was an advocate for sexual freedom and the First Amendment.
As the New York Times noted, the founder had a troubled relationship with feminist politics, particularly with journalist Gloria Steinem. In the early 60s, Steinem posed undercover as a bunny, even making it into a Playboy club. She ultimately gathered enough information for a two-part feature for Show magazine titled A Bunny's Tale.
Gloria Steinem is a multi-award-winning journalist and activist who was even referenced by Elle Woods in Legally Blonde.
In the first part, Steinem wrote that she began her journey after responding to a Playboy ad claiming that girls could earn $200 to $300 a week at a Playboy club. As it turned out, the pay was nowhere near close, as all the bunnies had to pay for the upkeep of their costumes, makeup, the mandatory false eyelashes, and 50% of the first $30 in tips that they made. Along with the low pay, the girls' treatment wasn't that great either.
It was being presented as a glamorous place. It was not the glamorous place that Hugh Hefner was trying to sell it as.
If they were to go to a Hefner party at his mansion, they couldn't bring any men at all. When Steinem published her piece, it was a sensation. As for Hef's thoughts, he had this to say to the New York Times. There's really no benefit to viewing sex as the enemy. The sex act is some of the best of what we are, as family and as a civilization.
Hugh Hefner never sued them for defamation as far as I know. Instead, he went on the charm offensive and promoted women within the company to do promotional roles and defend them against critics, or what they called radical feminists. It reminds me of the same complaints made at Baldoni, that he exploited disabled, terminally ill people for his TV show My Last Days, that was mentioned in Blake Lively's original complaint, and that was allegedly shut down by the Crisis PR team, which I showed in a previous video. Justin, the creator of a show called My Last Days, with which he raised money using GoFundMes and filmed people's intimate last days of life, exploits the struggles of people facing terminal illnesses for his own gain. He found my friend who was battling a serious illness and followed her life closely. Despite her grace in not speaking ill of him, I sensed from the start that something was deeply wrong. Justin weaponizes therapeutic language, presenting himself as thoughtful and supportive, yet his actions reveal a very different reality. He portrays himself as an ally to women and the vulnerable, but it's all a facade. He manipulates the vernacular of care to mask his true intentions. In reality, none of the proceeds from the show benefited the individuals it profiled. He even had the audacity to depict her hometown, a vibrant and affluent community, as a small, impoverished town. His portrayal was not just inaccurate, but insulting. Once the show aired, Justin took his profits and vanished, leaving nothing but a sense of exploitation in his wake. His behaviour was not just tacky and gross, it was a betrayal of the very people he claimed to uplift.
The promotions department was the big revenue for Playboy. The job was to go out there and be the best representative of Playboy that they could. And so any kind of event that somebody might have, oftentimes they would want the Playmate at that event to draw in customers.
Been accused of exploiting the female body time and time again.
Part of who you are as a human being is sexual. I don't think it's the same thing as... I think sexism and racism are two very different kinds of things. I think the primary aims of women's lib, the part that do not get the publicity and the TV and newspapers, are things that Playboy endorses and has worked for over the years. The part that does get all the publicity is a lot of nonsense.
Women were taking their power. They were in command of themselves. So I thought, well, wow, that's good to me. And it went along with the sexual revolution that was going on. I had a lot of power, a lot of freedom. It was freedom, you know?
That's Mickey Garcia, a former Playboy model who refused to sleep with Hefner, but still managed to get promoted to a promotions manager at Playboy. Then, in the 1980s, she ended up testifying in front of the Attorney General's Commission on Pornography that Hefner's security force helped cover up the discovery of an international ring of call girls in which more than one playmate was involved.
There were often times when I would be interviewed by a strong feminist, and she would come at me really hard. And I would just, yeah, and I would answer and let them know that I was definitely in charge of my life, and this was my choice. Now, of course, it came at a cost, but at that moment in time, I didn't know about that.
So what I notice is they both use women as props groups that stand next to them and make them look good, and they go on so many platforms to promote themselves and their ideas. Instead of amplifying what women are actually saying, they produce content to make it look like they support the issues. They often deflect the conversation, and people who challenge their views are made to seem radical, and it's about allowing their behavior instead of changing anything.
Over the years, there's been an increase in attacks from radical feminists who view Playboy and Hugh Hefner as the enemy.
Playboy's been singled out along with, the Miss America contest and some other things as, as the extreme example of what the new feminists feel is the wrong image for women. But having been described as an oppressor, can I respond just a little bit?
All right.
I'm more in sympathy than perhaps, the girls realize with...
Women.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm 35.
Than the ladies realize. I use girls referring to women of all ages.
You should stop. You want to be called a boy.
I see. Okay. I always felt it was complimentary, but...
Never thought you'd have your mouth washed out for saying girls.
No, that's right.
That's a very important
I'd never thought of girl as being, but I think there's validity to it. I think there's validity. I'd never thought of it as being, condescending.
That's because your magazine has an image of women at an arrested development.
Well, let me respond. Let me respond for just a moment, and then we'll
May
really
I just say
kick
that
it back
the ladies
and
in your
forth.
magazine have the opposite of arrested development?
Now here. Now, first of all, the girls in the magazine are admittedly young. The average age of our male reader is 26, so there's a certain logic to that.
Brooke Shields posed naked for a photo shoot when she was 12 years old that was published in a Playboy book. This photo shows Hefner travelling with Roman Polanski, a known pedophile, who was never convicted because he moved to a different country.
But in terms of my attitude on the feminist movement as it exists now, I think that women over generations and centuries have indeed been oppressed. I think there's no question about it. Yeah. It's only a relatively short time that they've had the vote, and a short time before that they were allowed to own property. I think there are still many areas in society in which they do not have equal job opportunity. One of the thrusts of the feminist movement is for better abortion laws. I think Playboy has done as much as any mass media in terms of trying to accomplish exactly that. But I take issue and separate in this one rather fundamental area. There is usually a parallel made between female emancipation and racial equality. And I don't think it's the same thing. Even though the feminist movement grew out of the civil rights, the current feminist movement grew out of the civil rights business. For this reason, I don't think that the color of a man's skin is any more important than whether he is blonde or brunette, blue-eyed or brown-eyed. I think whether you are male or female is the beginning of who you are as a human being. I think it's important, and I think that it is important emotionally as well as physically. I think there are differences, and I think there should continue to be differences. I think what we want to try to do is find roles in society that are not as limiting as they've been in the past, and they have been far more limiting for women than men, admittedly, but very limiting for both in the past. I hope we're going to evolve into a society in which the broadest spectrum of opportunities exist for both men and women, but I think that to begin with, we are, I like very much Mary Calderon's comment in a recent Playboy interview in which she said, she's less interested in women's rights than human rights.
The role that you have selected for women is degrading to women because you choose to see women as sex objects, not as full human beings.
Well,
Hold on now. The day that I haven't finished. The day that you are willing to come out here with a cottontail attached to your rear end. He has made the degradation of women a condition of employment in the Playboy clubs around the country. They have to get into these ridiculous costumes which deny their humanity and their femininity. You make them look like animals. Yes, women aren't bunnies. They're not rabbits. They're human beings.
All right. The Playboy symbol, the rabbit, of course, and the reason for having bunnies in the clubs, the symbol was originally a male figure, and it was picked quite innocently and simply some 16 years ago because we felt it was a rather playful and sexual symbol. The fact that the girls are dressed in costumes is no more complex than that, and the girls obviously don't find it degrading, or we wouldn't have as many working with us. In addition,
that's not true.
Just 1 minute. In addition, I know that there are a great many women who feel as you do, but there are also 1 out of every 4 readers of the magazine today is female, so there are obviously a lot of other women too. In terms of degrading and wearing a bunny tail, the parallel that's usually made is, why don't you create a women's magazine with nude men? Because there's some kind of a notion that, taking the clothes off is a degrading concept.
Hey, Helen Gurley Brown wants to put a man in Cosmopolitan. What do you think of that and her?
Well, that's another symptom of the same decadent problem, right?
Is she just a female hef?
Well, I don't know. I'm sort of... No, she's not. I mean, Helen Gurley Brown at least was the first person who ever said that it was okay for a woman to be single up into her 40s and 50s. One has to give her that. But she runs a magazine for women who want to know how to get men, just as Mr. Hefner runs a magazine for men who want to seduce women. And we don't think that's a proper, that's a sole relationship between men and women, or even certainly not the most important one. And maybe that's the reason that all these things about male influence and stuff like that you and Dr. May were talking about earlier has been going on.
At Playboy, our opposition was feminists. People were burning their bras. It was this whole idea of liberation for women and women being equal to men. They felt that women taking their clothes off to pose for the pleasure of men was sort of antithetical to feminism. I was very proud to have women who'd posed in the magazine saying, I have a right to do this. This is my body.
I was actually insulted. I felt as if I was a feminist myself, for goodness sakes.
Playboy went above and beyond to make it look like women held positions of power within their company. But it was all an illusion. Many of these women were given false promises and pretty much made to live like slaves.
Stop! I'm out of the game.
But I was kind of surprised to find out that the picture editor of Playboy would turn out to be a girl.
Well, I think a woman can be just as objective in a man in these matters. And besides, I can second-guess Mr. Hefner pretty good.
Marilyn Grabowski photographed the women nude. She was someone they all looked up to as the photographer and picture editor at Playboy. But what we now know is that sexual assault and harassment was considered normal behaviour behind the scenes, from the executives and from VIP guests like Bill Cosby.
He seen me and he started grabbing me, and I said, please, this was a big executive. I said, please don't do this. And he said, why do you think you came to work in corporate? And he just did what he had to do and turned around, raped me, and walked out.
The darkest experience I had was when I was drugged and raped by Bill Cosby.
PJ Matson was known as the bunny mother at the Chicago Playboy Mansion. She supervised 70 Playboy bunnies. She says the corporate office shut her up when she claimed Cosby raped her.
I called my boss and I told her what he had done to me. She said, you know that's Hefner's best friend, don't you? I said, I know, but he drugged and he raped me. And she said, if you want to keep your job, I suggest you shut your mouth. And that's what I did.
Exactly what Playboy was all about. The Mad Men experience. Women didn't have a voice, and they were accosted, and they were made fun of. Women were subservient.
Judy Huth was 15 when she and a friend were hanging out at Lacey Park in San Marino in 1974 when they spotted a film crew. As it happened, Peter Yates was shooting scenes for Mother, Jugs, and Speed. Cosby spotted the girls and immediately began chatting them up and showing them around the set with VIP treatment. He invited them to his tennis club that weekend, but when they arrived, he told them they needed to go to another house instead. At that house, he served the girls liquor and played pool, where the rule was anytime someone lost a game, they had to shotgun a beer. Naturally, Cosby ran circles around the two teenagers. After several drinks, Cosby told the girls he had a surprise for them. Surprise turned out to be the Playboy Mansion, and Cosby ordered the two to tell anyone who asked that they were 19. Judy asked to use the bathroom, and Cosby steered her to a bedroom suite with a bathroom. Cosby was sitting on the bed when she came out and asked her to sit next to him. He then forced one hand down her pants, and with the other, took Judy's hand and used it to pleasure himself. Castle Donuts in Santa Monica on November 18, 1975. Bill Cosby came to the window to order donuts for his crew and invited Margie to come by to the set of Mother, Jugs, and Speed. Margie became starstruck after meeting Larry Hagman and Raquel Welch, and Cosby invited her to a dinner party at his rental home. Cosby picked Margie up, but by the time they got to the house, the plans seemed to have changed, so he took her to the Playboy Mansion instead. He promised she would meet Hugh Hefner, but instead of the main house, Cosby took Margie to a guest house with a large rec room. Cosby challenged her to pinball, with the rule being that the loser had to take a pill of some sort that he had. Margie wound up losing at pinball and losing consciousness soon after. The next thing she remembered was Cosby inside her as he fondled her.
But I came to a little, and the first thing I saw was Bill Cosby's face not far above me, and we were both naked. He was inside me.
As she went in and out of consciousness, Cosby continued touching her sexually in some form. When she found herself alone in the room, Margie began getting dressed. Cosby returned, acting as if nothing had happened. Cosby told her they wouldn't be meeting Hugh Hefner that day because she wasn't dressed nice enough, and had one of his goons drive her home. Elizabeth was a 20-year-old flight attendant for American Airlines when she met Cosby on flight number 1 from New York to Los Angeles in 1976. Elizabeth later noted that he was very popular at the time with his humorous Jell-O ads. Cosby invited her to watch him play tennis with James Brown at the Playboy Mansion when they got to L.A. Elizabeth declined, and after they deplaned, Cosby offered to have his driver take her to her hotel, which Elizabeth also turned down. He nonetheless managed to track down her hotel and pressured her into accepting his invite. Cos, as he insisted she called him, was a perfect gentleman at the Playboy Mansion, so she agreed to dinner at Tokyo Kaikan. Elizabeth didn't drink, but Cos pressured her to drink sake, which had already been poured for her. Soon after, she went into what she later described as a trance-like state, like when you're under anesthesia. She was ushered to his hotel room, and as she became seriously ill, he made Elizabeth kneel down before experiencing what she would only say was the most horrifying thing that could happen to an innocent young woman. Elizabeth began throwing up in his Rolls Royce, and as she apologized, Cosby's driver remarked that she wasn't the first. The next day, Cosby called up Elizabeth, asking if they could meet up again back in New York. She told him it wasn't the wine that made me sick, and he knew it. The next day, she received 3 dozen roses. P.J. Maston was a bunny at the Playboy Club in Chicago in 1977.
1977, I believe, in Chicago. He was being interviewed in the Playmate Lounge. He phoned me on my private number at Playboy, which I didn't understand how he got that number, but he asked if I would join him for dinner that night. And I said, sure. I thought nothing of it. I know of him for 5 years. He told me to meet him at the Whitehall Hotel, and I showed up at the particular time he told me to. And when I walked in, there were 4 other men, and they were smoking cigars.
He offered her a Grand Marnier on the rocks. The next thing PJ remembered was waking up naked and bruised next to Cosby.
A couple hours later, he called me in the office and asked, why did I leave? And I said, I was scared to say anything. I said, had to go back to work. So he says, I'm sending you a gift. About 4 hours later, a 4-foot ficus tree showed up in my office with a note on it that said something to the effect that friendships have to be groomed like you have to groom this tree. He continued the call, and I kept turning him down. And then he would call and ask for particular bunnies, and I told him he couldn't talk to them on the phone, and I would take a message. I took all the messages for weeks, and I threw them all out.
PJ told her supervisor what had happened. She was then reminded, you know that's Hugh Hefner's best friend, right?
And she said, nobody's going to believe you. I suggest you keep your mouth shut.
Denise, you know what you did wrong. So I was wondering, why don't you come out of the match and sit in a chair with me?
I'm Sarita Butterfield. I met Bill Cosby after I modeled for the November 1977 issue of Playboy magazine.
Cosby was so impressed with what he saw, he insisted on having her for dinner. Somehow, Cos was able to sell his family on the logic of having a Playboy playmate they'd never met as their guest for Christmas Eve at their Shelburne Falls home. At one point after dinner, Cosby cornered Sarita in the guest room, kissed her, and tried to force himself on her.
After the dinner, later that evening, he assaults me, corners me, gets me alone in the guest house. The first thing he went for was my hair. He grabbed my hair, and then he just started groping me, like grabbing on my breast.
Sarita was able to break free and continued to fend him off as he kept trying to cop some feels throughout the evening.
Playmate Mickey Garcia claimed she was raped by one of the company's sponsors prior to an autograph signing.
What happened to me is that I got raped twice. After the first rape, he sent me into the bathroom to take a shower. Apparently, he liked someone fresh after he had done what he had done to me. So when my rapist ordered up a playmate for a job, I simply instructed my secretary to tell him to never call again. Never. He would never, ever get a model from Playboy. Never.
Hugh Hefner was accused of bestiality by his ex-girlfriend.
Of electronic equipment in the house, which includes videotape equipment. Sometimes things happen in the bedroom.
We have all these testimonies from women that were abused under Hugh Hefner's Playboy empire. This information has been suppressed, and to this day, there's more people that don't know about it than those that do, and that's what keeps the brand going. The one big documentary, Secrets of Playboy by A&E Productions, is only available on a subscription service. I've tried to show some clips from it, but it's more than likely they'll be copyright claimed. Many people came to Hugh Hefner's defense, but there was an official statement made by the Playboy organization in support of the victims.
What really went on behind the walls of the famous Playboy mansion? Hugh Hefner, who died 4 years ago, and his empire are the target of a 10-part documentary on A&E premiering tonight. The documentary alleges that the Playboy mansion was rampant with wild drug use and sexual assaults. Alexandra Dean interviewed more than 100 women for the documentary.
We never looked at it really closely and was like, what's really going on there? Why are all these young women hanging out with this really old guy? What's he doing to them? And are they really happy with this situation?
Holly Madison appeared on the reality show The Girls Next Door. She lived in the mansion for 7 years and says she felt like she was in a cult.
It was so easy to get isolated from the outside world there. You had a 9 o'clock curfew. You weren't really allowed to leave.
She claims Hefner forced her to participate in an orgy and that her having sex by appointment every week with the octogenarian was traumatic.
I felt like I was just in this cycle of gross things.
And some women really did feel that Playboy was this great playground for them, and they had a lot of fun and they felt really powerful from it, and it was great for their careers. Other women felt like it had destroyed their lives.
Cosby has denied every allegation of wrongdoing. Playboy, which is under new ownership, issued a statement of support for the women in the documentary. Today's Playboy is not Hugh Hefner's Playboy. We trust and validate these women and their stories, and we strongly support those individuals who have come forward to share their experiences.
I think all the objectification and then thinking like, okay, Hef's controlling in every single way, and he's profiting off of us. He's profiting off of, I say us because there were always girls in and out.
Crystal Hefner, his last wife, only came forward recently with her experiences. She was that brainwashed. She said it took her years to realise how she'd been manipulated and to heal from her experience.
So why was it that made you realise that he was, because he was always profiting off you, wasn't he? That you were the things that made the myth real.
I guess for me, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, probably the last thing, but you are right. He was always profiting off of us all the way to the very, very beginning of his company. Marilyn Monroe, he bought those photos of her from a calendar company.
That was the first issue of Playboy.
The very first issue of Playboy. He put those photos in the issue, paid her nothing. She got $0 for helping this man create an empire. And now he's buried next to her in Los Angeles, and she didn't get a say in that either.
Because he was obsessed with wanting to be buried next to her.
Yeah, he would remind me constantly, you know where I want to be buried. I've bought the plot. That's all I care about. And
I mean, that's sort of abusive, really. It's sort of abusive in death. It's weird.
It's very weird. I'm still trying. As I speak about it, more things come up, and it's very strange.
So how much of, because reading this, you're kind of going, well, how much of this did you think at the time? Because you've written this with some distance and some hindsight, and So obviously it has that sense of how wrong it kind of was, as you describe it. But how much of that were you aware of at the time as you were doing it?
I was aware that it was weird. It was a weird situation. I was aware that the power dynamic was completely off. I was aware that we just talk about Hef and no one else's feelings or thoughts matter. I knew something was off, but it wasn't until I had space where I realized the narcissism and the misogyny, and the Me Too movement helped me justify what had happened there. And
just explain that. How did you relate to the Me Too?
Well, Hef's friends would come up to you and be like, give me my hug, and like press themselves as close as they can. And then they'd go to the next girl, and they were all perverts, like 99% of the people that came through there. And you just think, oh, this is just how people are, because that was my bubble, that was the world.
They would just grab you,
press themselves against you. My friend recently sent me a video, and one of his friends was saying, oh, give me some, and it's disgusting. And once Me Too happened, I thought, okay, this isn't behavior that's normal. This isn't how a real man behaves or real men behave. And it helped me feel more justified in knowing that I was right, and that, you know, my feelings and that inner voice was right all along. I just had pushed it down for so long.
I mean, did it really take the Me Too movement until then for you to realize that?
It took Hef's death. It took Me Too. Before Hef died, you know, I felt super trapped, but by then I already had millions of dollars of my own, and I remember talking to my mom and saying, I can't leave him. Like, he needs me. And I stayed to the very end.
I mean, that's what I sort of want to come back to in the story. I mean, you were annoyed about the reality TV deal, so you ran away. But then you went back.
I know. I did go back.
I mean, why?
I don't know. Why do people return to cults? I'm not sure. I think I just, like, oh, maybe this is where I belong. Maybe this is where I need to be. And I ended up back there.
Because there are a couple of moments in the book where you just kind of say, I went back, we decided to get married, but you don't say why it happened or how it happened, and it's kind of confusing as a reader, because you can't, really, why? What are you doing? You know, it's just like, is what you're thinking.
I think it's my people-pleasing nature. I think I had no boundaries. I only recently learned what a boundary was in the last couple of years. And I thought, oh, Hef misses me. I felt wanted and needed. And I thought, if I go back, like, I'll do things differently. And he did respect me more when I came back. He did. And I think it took me leaving for him to realize that people can walk out on him. And he treated me better, and I was more myself once we got married. And I ditched the bleach, and I got rid of the implants, and I think he respected me more. And I would really hope to think that he learned some type of lesson before he passed away.
What were you marrying for? Because you said you weren't in love with him, and he was probably incapable of knowing what love was. You weren't really marrying for the money, because you had a sort of very restrictive prenup agreement. So why?
I just know that's what he wanted, and I thought, oh, maybe he wants a good PR story, like, before the end of his life. So I just went along with it. I really just went along with it. And I do remember picking out a pink dress to get married in, and thinking to myself, oh, when I get married for real, I'll wear white. And so part of me knew it wasn't real. It wasn't real. And I just went along with it. And, you know, I've had a lot of women write to me since this book, and they say that they were in a narcissistic relationship, and they try to leave and they come back, and it's this push and pull. And when they finally get out, they're free. But until then, it's hard to explain. I thought, wow, this is a really broken boy. Still, in this 80-year-old body, yeah. He was a broken child. His parents never showed him love. All the girls he had crushes on went off with somebody else. His first wife cheated on him. And, you know, he overcompensated by creating this empire. You know, some people try.
That's quite a sympathetic way of looking at him, isn't it?
I saw it that way. I did feel sorry for him, because he had this void in his soul, and some people fill it with drugs, alcohol, shopping. gambling, and he filled it with sex, women. And when we use these things to try and fill it, it doesn't work.
Hefner always blamed his parents, who were conservative Methodists, for making him feel repressed sexually, and that's why he felt like he was a fighter of the sexual revolution. He said they weren't affectionate with him, but his mum's literally got her arms around him in this picture.
And the notion of Playboy was, quite frankly, to simply create a lifestyle magazine for the young urban guy, for single guys, because all the men's magazines after World War II were outdoor adventure books. And I felt there was room for a different kind of men's magazine. So I went to everybody I could think of, friends, relatives, and got a few $100s here, a few $100s there, total of $8,000.
And it's only when you go really deep into the research that you find out he did sue someone and threatened to sue a journalist, Suzanne Moore, for calling him a pimp, and that his ideas were all from someone else. Alfred Kinsey, who it looks like was connected to the Nazis and ped activity, and apparently this freak performed sexual experiments on children and died of an infection in his testicles. But come to find out, this is where all the modern ideas of sex education have come from, and his Sex Institute, which is paid for by the American government, which invested in these experiments, is still going strong.
Playboy
Magazine.
sued you, or you sued Playboy?
No, Playboy sued me for libel and slander.
And what happened?
I won.
She's fought the pornography industry for decades and even won a lawsuit against Playboy.
One of the virgins in college that read Kinsey and believed him was a guy named Hugh Hefner. Okay, yeah, so he's in college.
So Hefner was an advocate for Kinsey's.
He reads Kinsey and he says, hey, everybody's been lying to me. They've all been diddling around doing all this stuff, and I have been standing here being a nice guy. Forget it. He says, I will be, and I'm quoting him, Kinsey's pamphleteer. I will be Kinsey's pamphleteer.
Really?
So from there, he began to advocate for changes in the law, and he created a magazine called Playboy, which then he said would reflect what Kinsey had found about human sexuality.
In his fraudulent
data. America was educated by a pedophile whose work was labeled as science. Just as Darwin was the father of legitimizing evolution, Kinsey was the father of legitimizing the sexual revolution and all that's based upon that today.
Sure enough, Hefner was true to his word. Not only did he popularize pornography on a global scale, he also helped to legalize it.
I venture to suggest that what we are putting into our books on sex education today is based almost fully upon philosophic guess.
And of course, it was the foundation of all the changes in our laws, the sodomy laws, the abortion laws, everything else. I mean, he's there. His handprints are on everything that deals with sexuality. From all these people, he was able to tell us, quote, the truth about ourselves, the truth about what we were really doing behind closed doors. And he lied about our fathers, my father's generation and grandfathers. He lied about them because he projected onto them what he himself was doing.
What he was struggling with.
Yes.
It didn't take long for Kinsey to deceive the world with his fraudulent data, convincing us that we were sexually repressed and ignorant to the truth.
First, the media drank the Kool-Aid. They were carefully taken care of by the Kinsey Institute to drink the Kool-Aid, okay? And then once they drank the Kool-Aid, the scientists, quote unquote, drank the Kool-Aid, and then the legislators drank the Kool-Aid, and then the lawmakers drank the Kool-Aid, and here we are.
Essentially, what Kinsey did was he changed our belief about ourselves. This change of belief naturally changed our behavior. Soon, Kinsey's ideas permeated everything in our society, from our legal system reducing the penalty for sexual crimes and legalizing abortion, the media promoting his philosophy to the educational system, teaching children his views on sexuality. What's more, the pharmaceutical industry capitalized from the sexual revolution. We saw the emergence of STDs, sexual enhancers, and the morning after pill. The divorce rate soared along with sexual crime. As a people, we would never be the same again. our innocence was lost forever. Ultimately, Kinsey's fraudulent data led to the legalization of pornography.
Well, here we are decades later, and now Justin Baldoni is projecting his ideas to millions of people, allegedly, that his issues about not being man enough came from his father, who had a strong belief in the Baha'i faith, which we're going to get onto, and from seeing pornography from an early age, which led to a self-confessed addiction. And this was something he brought up on the set of the movie to Blake Lively and other cast members, as did his CEO, Jamie Heath, as well as showing nude photos and videos of partners and asking her about how she climaxed with her husband. In 2021, journalist Andrew Billen interviewed him for The Times and described him as the most conflicted person he'd ever met. On one hand, coming across as a devoted husband, father and male feminist, but on the other, he's a materialistic, fast car driving porn addict who objectified his own body just as much as anyone else's. A bit like Hugh Hefner.
Well, I was introduced to porn when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
Long before I ever, could have an erection or even knew how I felt about anything. And it became, it was, like any young boy who sees boobs for the first time. It's exciting.
Seeing someone's breasts is not pornography, but anyway.
Because our culture has shielded them from us because they're sexualized, right? Again, it's cultural. You go to places like Africa and different tribes, or you see different things, and the breast is the breast, right? But we've sexualized this thing. So of course it becomes fascinating and interesting, and you're like, oh my God, boobs.
Now, nudity, I think, is something that in America particularly, we've always had a hang-up about. Sex has become more permissive in films and in books, etc. But really, only in the last year or two has nudity made any real appearance in the U.S. films.
Yeah, in America.
How does an actress as beautiful as you are, how do you feel about doing nude scenes?
Hey, Blake. It is 2 a.m. Hopefully this does not wake you up. Whew. Wow. There's so much I want to say to you, and I hope that we can FaceTime or see each other in person soon and get to talk more. But I'm just going to send you a few thoughts, and hopefully it's not going to be more than a few minutes. But that I don't have the best track record. I don't think either one of us have the best track record for our voice memos. I want to start with an apology. Man, reading the second part of your message, my heart sank, and I'm really sorry. I for sure fell short, and you worked really hard on that, and the way you framed it, and how that made you feel. I just want to say thank you for sharing that with me. That takes a lot of trust and vulnerability, and I feel really grateful that you feel safe enough to tell me that that's how you feel and share that with me. And I'm really sorry. I fucked up. That is a fail on my part. One thing you should know about me is I will admit and apologize when I fail. I am far from perfect. I'm a very flawed man, as my wife will attest. And and I'm gonna fuck up. I'm gonna say the wrong thing. I'm gonna put my foot in my mouth. I'm gonna piss you off probably, but I will always apologize and find my way back to center. That is one thing I can assure you of. And I'm sorry I made you feel that way. That must have felt terrible. And I will for sure do better. That was not my best weekend, and I should have given it more time. And
why is he using the seductive voice? I speeded this bit up because he does waffle on without really saying anything. It feels like a very manipulative, grovelling apology. But he never gets to what he's done wrong.
Work that we're doing with the domestic violence partner that we found no more, and just my vision, and I just know that this can be really, really special, and it's gonna be special, and you're the secret sauce, and we're the secret sauce. And anyways, I have so much more to say. I'm gonna stop rambling because Jesus Christ, it's been 6 minutes and 30 seconds, so fuck me. I'm sorry. You probably have kids all over you and a baby on your boob, and you're listening to me ramble at 2 a.m. I hope you're feeling better, and give Ryan my love. Thank you for sending me. That means the world to me that you trust me with your feelings and your thoughts like that. And I can't wait to spend more time with you. Okay, I'm done cutting myself off. Good night.
My dad is awesome. He's loving, he's kind, he's sensitive, he's nurturing, he's here. He's crying. But, sorry, Dad, as a kid, I resented him for it because I blamed him for making me soft, which wasn't welcomed in the small town in Oregon that we had moved to, because being soft meant that I was bullied. See, my dad wasn't traditionally masculine, so he didn't teach me how to use my hands. He didn't teach me how to hunt, how to fight, man stuff. Instead, he taught me what he knew, that being a man was about sacrifice and doing whatever you can to take care of and provide for your family. But there was another role I learned how to play from my dad, who I discovered learned it from his dad, a state senator who later in life had to work nights as a janitor to support his family. And he never told a soul. That role was to suffer in secret. And now 3 generations later, I find myself playing that role too.
One thing I know, this guy does not suffer in secret. I've never heard anyone talk so much about themselves and what they're going through. For the record, his dad owned a product placement company. He's always apologising and doesn't seem to learn from his mistakes. And I think he's just one of those people that says things he thinks people want to hear. What he says and what he does are at odds, like inviting an actual predator onto his Man Enough podcast.
It's like you say the wrong thing, and I don't want to, I'm a straight white man with like tons of privilege. Like I'm at the intersection of all privilege. And so if I don't want to say the wrong thing and hurt the movement.
What is your actual core message with the TED Talk, with the book? What is it?
It's really simple. The core message is, I believe we need to undefine what it means to be a man, not redefine it. We're creating room for us to explore our hearts, our feelings, our thoughts, our ideas, to embrace our feminine qualities, which as boys and men, we're told that for God's sakes, you do not embrace your feminine qualities. That's all got to be thrown out the door to make room for the fact that men can also be sensitive, emotional, loving, kind beings and still be a man. And women can embrace their masculinity.
Yeah.
And neither of us should be shamed or policed for being and expressing the fullness of our humanity. And that's at its core what it's about.
I still have no clue what he means, and as a woman, I do not find one thing he says relatable. I could not understand how he has so many female fans, but I think deep down he knows that despite everything he says about equality, people follow him for his looks and for this fantasy lifestyle he portrays. During my research, I found Pinterest pages with Justin Baldoni aesthetic and single dad aesthetic when he's not single. There's lots of photos of men with bare chests and unshaven faces. That's the image he likes to show up. And what's most disturbing is how he's using his own daughter and her most intimate moments as marketing opportunities, like this story about her having a tantrum going viral. And he's clearly projecting his views onto her, pretty unhealthy views, to the point where he might be putting her in danger, and he might be an actual psychopath.
I'm trying to raise a fearless girl, and it's very hard because you have older generations in the family that get very scared when my daughter does crazy things. So there's a lot of like, be careful and don't do that. And I'm trying to like tell everybody, relax. Like, it's okay. To do dangerous things carefully, I think, is a good, beautiful thing. And so my daughter loves to climb. So this is a photo of her, all of her older aunts and uncles. We're talking about people in their 70s and 80s resisting the urge to say, get down from there. And I was like cheering her on as she was scaling this, what is this? It was like this lamppost. And she was just scaling it fearlessly. And I was looking at my family, just telling them all she was safe. Like, it's okay, don't say anything. And then she got down and I gave her the biggest hug, and she was so proud of herself for doing it. And that's how we're trying to raise her. Parenting is like the greatest gift. speaking of parenting, this is me and my son. He came to visit me on set. My beautiful boy.
Because he was in a TV show about making women pregnant, he thought of the idea, or someone did, of making money out of pregnant women. He never misses an opportunity to use people to try and make more money.
So let's talk about the app.
Sure. Do you guys know about Belly Bump? You guys? So when my wife was pregnant with Maya, I wanted to make a time-lapse movie of her growing belly. Because I'd seen these really cool ones on YouTube, and they just seemed so creative, and I was like, these husbands are amazing. I want to be like as good as them. And I kept forgetting, because you got to take a picture like every day or every couple days, and then you have to line it up perfectly. And I'm a filmmaker, and I'm good with that stuff, and it was hard. It was hard to do. And I realized, like, well, you know, this could be like the baby book of the future. And women, like, capturing and sharing your pregnancy story is incredible. I mean, you get to be pregnant for most people once, twice. Some people never get to be pregnant, and they have to experience through other people. It's one of the greatest joys of life that you could possibly have. So I was like, what if we could create a way to help women capture and share their story in, like, kind of the new, 2016 on way via a time-lapse movie. So we built Belly Bump.
So Justin got investment from a venture capital firm, no doubt, to promote an app that no one asked for. That's why it flopped. And fails to mention that his fans, I'm assuming that's who he's targeting, will be uploading pictures of their bodies, maybe undressed, to an app. And that data is going to be collected and used as collateral. It may be compromised, because that's how tech investments work. But Justin doesn't care about that. He used creepy memes on their social media, and he encouraged users to upload pictures of themselves and share them to their Instagram account and compare themselves to professional photos of celebrities or influencers like Blake Lively. And then tries to make out that's helping women or making their husbands feel part of the pregnancy.
And it was also a cool way for men to be involved in their wives' pregnancies, or for surrogates, and for anything. And so
I was just actually thinking that, like, if you're not present every day for it, then
exactly.
That's great.
And everybody has family all over the world, and in our attention span, we're also ADD now.
Another agenda he's been trying to push is that he's ADD and that he's neurodivergent, as a way to excuse his behaviour instead of taking responsibility for it. He revealed his clinical diagnosis on another podcast in December 24, coincidentally. Quote, "I haven't spoken about this publicly. In text messages that were revealed in one of his lawsuits, we can see his PR were advising him against this, but he still went ahead and did it, because that's Justin. He always has to do everything he wants."
If I could see the whole pregnancy in 20 seconds, like, how cool is that? And then when your baby's born, we wanted to make it for new moms. So when your baby's born, or if your kid's 2 or 5 or 32, you take a picture every day of your baby or your child, and you can watch the face change.
Because new mums should be uploading more pictures of babies to the internet, not when those images can end up in the worst hands. This is from someone who said they saw porn at 10 years old.
It's like you press the button and it just compresses it all into a movie for you. So we try to make it as simple and foolproof as possible. And it's exciting. So it just came out this week.
It's actually completely genius. Like, it's one of those things where you're like, how has this never existed before?
It just, and I think it has to different degrees, but we wanted to build it in a way that was like, just you could, your baby could do it. Like, we wanted it to be as simple as possible. You line it up and then what's cool is when it reminds you to take the photo, which was the big thing for me, because I kept forgetting. And if you've been pregnant, pregnancy brain is legit. It's real. There should be scientific documented papers about it somewhere. It's like you just forget, because I don't know.
And it's contagious.
And it's contagious, because, so it reminds you to take the pictures, and then you can see the previous day's photos and line it up perfectly, and it's fun. It's a fun little thing on the side.
Another thing his crisis PR tried to keep quiet was his attachment to the Baha'i religion. Him, his wife, and his CEO, Jamie Heath, who was also accused by Blake Lively and a cast member of very inappropriate behaviour, and the main investor in Wayfarer, as of 2020, when it was pretty much going bust, billionaire Steve Sarowitz, are leaders and spokespeople for this religion, which apparently is growing at a very fast rate in America. And Wayfarer is pushing it into Hollywood. Multiple employees have complained about how it's taken over the office culture, with its evangelizing aspect and fake positivity. Shane Norman, who is black and gay, said, Steve Sarowitz told him at his interview, "We need somebody here that looks like you." He was hired as an executive producer and manager for the Man Enough podcast, but then he was fired in 2020 and he sued them for unfair dismissal and racial discrimination. The case was dismissed and they reached a settlement. Ironically, he went on to found the Zeus Network, if you want to know about exploitation of black people. But that's a story for another day. The religion is against same-sex intercourse or intercourse outside of marriage. Interesting when they're addicted to porn. And encourages closing your eyes to racial differences and to heal from racism by moving on. They have examples of black men who have married white women and embraced into the community, which reminds me of when Justin put on his festival for homeless people in Skid Row, many of whom are black, and saying there is no rich, there is no poor. But Jamie Heath, who comes from a biracial family, has a lot of issues. Just like Justin, he waffles on about nothing, he uses his wife as a prop, and although he says he's not ashamed to admit to his flaws, he does not seem like someone that has been healed, either by the religion or the therapist. He and Justin are both in therapy. Trigger warning, this is content of a very sensitive and disturbing nature.
When I was 19, I found my mother who tried to take her life. And I've held a lot of pain. My mom's also bipolar. And I've been angry, I'm 54 now, all of my life for what it meant to us. My mom and I had a huge fight a month ago where I said some things that it all came out. All of it came out of my frustration and anger. And, I've been through some things in my life that you know of, and just my own childhood abuse and her not necessarily being present, blaming her condition and her brain pain. And I have legitimate reason to have my pain. But maybe not so much legitimate reason to blame her.
Liz Plank, the female co-host of that podcast, has now resigned.
I'm super, super ashamed of some of the things that I've done in my life and the people that I hurt. But I'm not ashamed to admit that I hurt people. I'm no longer ashamed to admit that I'm flawed.
It's very clear that Jamie has been through a lot of trauma in his life. His dad is also a musician and active member of the Baha'i faith and introduced him to the music industry at a young age. And this guy is meant to be a key figure in the Baha'i religion. He speaks to the youth and gives them advice. But like Justin, he's preaching a message that if you're flawed and you say you're flawed, it's a bit like trauma dumping. You get sympathy and a pass from God, and that they should be allowed to do that.
That can't be a reason that we don't stay close to God and believe that we can get back up after we fall. Friends, I thank you so much.
But the problem is they're preaching about humanity and being close to God and their need to express their pain. But when someone speaks up about how their behaviour is harmful, they don't seem like they can take it. Blake Lively has said that from day one of the filming, both him and Justin invaded her private space on multiple occasions when she asked them not to. They came into her makeup trailer unannounced when she was undressed. Many times she had a new baby she was trying to breastfeed. They made comments about her body and about motherhood and about personal issues like having sex without consent. When she needed to speak to Jamie about Justin's behaviour, he insisted on having a spontaneous meeting at that exact moment. She agreed but asked him to keep his back turned. But then she caught him staring at her topless. Another actress in the film, Jenny Slate, had her own uncomfortable incident with him involving her apartment. We're not exactly sure what happened because this was another thing kept private by the Crisis PR team, as was another story about Justin inviting a student up to his hotel room. And then, of course, there was the inclusion, or addition as it was never in the original story, of a sex scene where the main character loses her virginity when she's underage, which Justin insisted on needing to be in the film. And they added in extra nude scenes that were not in the original contract. Women are not obliged to give birth naked, but that was the vision Jamie and Justin had for their film. And that's what their wives did, apparently. Now, somehow, a lot of people online bought into the false identity of Justin and his brand. His following is almost cult-like. They can't see anything he's done wrong. There's so many comments saying what a great person he is, such a lovely guy, when he's a fake and he only cares about himself. Why would someone who supports women's rights and wants to be known for helping domestic violence victims want more nudity and underage sex scenes in their film, and then use the same crisis PR that Johnny Depp used against Amber Heard to make people dislike the woman he asked to star in his film because he didn't like her husband unfollowed him on Instagram? Boo-hoo. Imagine if Blake Lively never saw all the messages about the smear campaign and how much they were spending on the social combat plan to cover up Justin's behaviour. Even trying to bring her best friend Taylor Swift into it, saying she's a bully. They've made Blake Lively the scapegoat for their failing. People who don't know the whole story are still falling for it, because what sexual harassment has she been accused of? Justin and his phony brand could never be as big as Playboy. But the misogyny and the covering up and the behaviour is right out of their playbook.